Samaritan experiment. Imagine walking across campus late at night. You see someone slumped against a wall, clearly in need of help. Do you stop, or do you keep walking, telling yourself you're late, or someone else will help? This is the question behind the Good Samaritan experiment, a study in human kindness, or the lack of it. Researchers asked seminary students to prepare a talk on the Good Samaritan parable from the Bible. Then, as the students walked to the lecture hall, they passed a person who appeared injured and helpless. Some were told they were late, some on time, and others ahead of schedule. The results were striking. The students' likelihood to help depended far more on time pressure than their moral beliefs. Many who had just studied compassion walked right past the person in need. The experiment reveals a hard truth about human behavior. It's easy to know what's right, but harder to act on it when we are distracted, rushed, or unsure. Kindness is not just about belief, it's about attention, awareness, and willingness to take action. This study also highlights how situational forces shape our choices. We like to think that being good is natural, but circumstances, stress, and social cues strongly influence what we actually do. It's a reminder that morality is not automatic. It requires effort, focus, and sometimes courage.
The endless shock, the infinite mirror. Imagine standing before an infinite mirror. You see yourself reflected, but also every thought, fear, dream, and memory layered within. This is the idea behind the infinite mirror, a metaphor for the journey we've taken through psychology, consciousness, and the mind. Psychology acts like a mirror, reflecting not only who we are, but also the forces shaping us. Memories, beliefs, emotions, and instincts. Over hundreds of experiments, we've explored obedience, perception, consciousness, memory, and even the limits of reality itself. Each experiment is a reflection, showing us patterns of thought, human vulnerability, and resilience. This concept is fascinating because it reminds us that self-understanding is never final. The mind is vast and deep, always changing, always learning. Every reflection offers insight, but also more questions. It's a gentle, endless exploration, like staring into a mirror that stretches to infinity, revealing both the familiar and the unknown. At the same time, it feels slightly mysterious and humbling. Looking into this infinite mirror, we see not just our conscious self, but shadows of unconscious drives, inherited instincts, and collective patterns. It invites quiet reflection on identity, choice, and the final experiment. Imagine the mystery of what happens after we die. Does consciousness simply vanish, or could it continue in some form? This is the question behind consciousness after death, a topic explored through philosophy, psychology, and even near-death experiences. Scientists study near-death experiences, brain activity during clinical death, and reports from people who were revived. Some describe vivid visions, feelings of peace, or encounters with loved ones. Philosophers ask whether consciousness might exist independently of the body. While there is no definite answer, the question itself is deeply compelling. This concept is fascinating because it confronts the ultimate unknown. It challenges assumptions about life, identity, and the limits of perception. If consciousness continues beyond physical death, it redefines existence, reality, and the meaning of life itself. Even considering this possibility encourages reflection on what matters.
The Panpsychism Revival. Imagine if everything around you, rocks, water, trees, even atoms, had some form of consciousness, no matter how tiny. This idea is called panpsychism, and it has recently gained renewed interest among philosophers and scientists. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is not only in humans or animals, but is a fundamental aspect of reality. Even the smallest particles might have experience, awareness, or a form of mind. While this doesn't mean rocks think like humans, it challenges the idea that consciousness suddenly emerges only in complex brains. This concept is fascinating because it expands the boundaries of mind. It encourages us to see the universe as alive in a subtle, hidden way. Trees swaying in the wind, rivers flowing, or stars burning far away could all contain some form of awareness. The idea invites curiosity, wonder, and reverence for the interconnectedness of life and matter. The collective unconscious. Imagine the collective unconscious. Imagine a hidden layer of the mind that we all share. A mental space filled with symbols, instincts, and ideas common to humanity. This is the collective unconscious, a concept introduced by Carl Jung. Jung suggested that beyond personal experiences, humans carry inherited psychological patterns. Archetypes like the hero, the mother, or the trickster appear across cultures, stories, and dreams, even if people have never encountered them directly. These patterns shape behavior, imagination, and perception in subtle ways. This concept is fascinating because it connects individual minds to something larger. It suggests that we are not entirely isolated in our thinking. Our dreams, fears, and creativity may echo patterns that have existed for generations, linking us across time and space. The collective unconscious reminds us of the deep, shared aspects of being human. At the same time, it is slightly mysterious and unsettling. If parts of our psyche are inherited and universal, how much of our identity is truly ours? Are we always influenced by invisible forces of culture, history, and evolution? This idea encourages reflection on self-awareness, empathy, and understanding the subtle currents shaping thoughts and emotions. The future of brain-machine interfaces. Future of brain-machine interfaces. Imagine controlling a computer, a robot, or even another person's device with just your thoughts. This is the idea behind brain-machine interfaces, or BMIs, a cutting-edge field of neuroscience and technology. Researchers are developing devices that connect the brain directly to machines. Electrodes or sensors pick up neural activity, translating thoughts into actions. People with paralysis have used BMIs to move robotic arms or type messages. In the future, it might allow anyone to interact with technology seamlessly without keyboards or screens. This concept is fascinating because it blurs the line between mind and machine. Your thoughts could directly influence the world, extending your abilities beyond natural limits. It raises questions about identity, control, and the relationship between human consciousness and technology. Could machines become extensions of our minds? Could our minds merge with digital systems? At the same time, it is slightly unsettling. Brain-machine interfaces reveal how vulnerable and malleable our mental processes can be. Who controls the technology? Could thoughts be monitored, influenced, or hacked? These possibilities remind us of the responsibility and care required when merging biology and technology.
The eternal sunshine hypothesis. Imagine a world where you could erase all painful memories and start fresh, feeling only happiness. This idea is inspired by the concept behind the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and is sometimes called the Eternal Sunshine Hypothesis. Researchers explore how altering or removing memories could affect mood, personality, and mental health. If trauma or sadness could be erased, life might feel lighter and more joyful. However, memories, even painful ones, teach lessons, shape relationships, and build resilience. Removing them completely may also remove parts of identity. The hypothesis is fascinating because it asks deep questions about human experience. Can happiness exist without memory? Are we defined by the hardships we endure, or can we truly be free of them? It blends psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy, inviting reflection on how the mind.
The ethics of memory erasure. Imagine if scientists could remove certain memories from your mind.
painful experiences, embarrassing moments, or even entire relationships. This is not science fiction. Research into memory manipulation and erasure is real, raising the question, should we erase memories? Even if we could. Psychologists study how memories are formed, stored, and sometimes modified. Experiments with animals and humans show that certain chemicals or therapies can weaken or remove specific memories. While this could help treat trauma, PTSD, or phobias, it also raises ethical dilemmas. Memories shape who we are. If we remove them, do we change the core of our identity? This concept is fascinating because it blends neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy. Memory erasure could offer relief from suffering, but it also reminds us that pain and hardship contribute to growth, learning, and empathy. Altering memory is powerful, but it may come at a hidden cost. At the same time, it feels unsettling. The idea of losing parts of oneself, even intentionally, challenges our sense of control, morality, and selfhood. How much of our identity is tied to the memories we carry, even the painful ones? The ethical implications force deep reflection on human nature.
Mind-uploading experiments. Imagine if one day scientists could copy your brain into a computer. Your thoughts, memories, and personality would continue to exist digitally. This idea is called mind uploading, and researchers explore it as a possibility for the future of consciousness. Experiments in this area are mostly theoretical now, but scientists study how information from the brain could be mapped, stored, and recreated. The concept raises questions about identity, continuity, and what it truly means to be you. If a perfect digital copy exists, is it still you or a separate consciousness? Mind uploading is fascinating because it pushes the limits of imagination, science, and philosophy. It challenges traditional ideas of mortality, memory, and self. Could consciousness survive beyond the biological body? Could we live multiple lives as digital versions of ourselves? These questions spark curiosity, awe, and the simulation hypothesis. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you know, the sky, the trees, even your own memories, are part of a computer simulation. This is the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our reality could be artificially created by an advanced intelligence. Philosophers, scientists, and futurists explore this concept to question the nature of reality. If we are in a simulation, what does that mean for free will, ethics, and personal identity? While we can't prove it, thinking about it has real psychological effects. People often feel awe, curiosity, or even unease when imagining the possibility. The simulation hypothesis is fascinating because it combines science, philosophy, and imagination. It forces the mind to confront the limits of knowledge and consider that reality may be more complex than it seems. Our perception of self, society, and the universe might be shaped by rules and programming beyond our awareness. At the same time, the idea can be unsettling. It reminds us that certainty is rare and that reality, as we perceive it, may be fragile or constructed. This uncertainty can feel disorienting, but it also invites reflection and mindfulness, encouraging us to appreciate the experiences we have, whether simulated or real.
Brain-in-a-Vat thought experiments. Imagine if your brain were removed from your body and placed in a vat, hooked up to a computer, sending it perfect sensory experiences. Everything you see, hear, and feel would seem real, but it would all be an illusion. This is the brain-in-a-vat thought experiment, a famous idea in philosophy. Philosophers use this experiment to explore knowledge, reality, and perception. It asks, how can we know that the world we experience is real and not a simulation? If our senses can be fooled, what can we truly trust? This thought experiment is unsettling, but also fascinating because it pushes us to question the foundations of reality and consciousness. The brain-in-a-vat concept shows that perception is subjective. Our brains create the world we experience using sensory information. But if those signals are manipulated, reality itself becomes uncertain. This challenges assumptions about truth, knowledge, and what it means to exist.
Neuroplasticity Experiments. Neuroplasticity Experiments. Imagine your brain as a flexible network, constantly changing with experience. This is the idea of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, grow new connections, and adapt throughout life. Scientists study neuroplasticity by observing how the brain changes after learning, injury, or new experiences. For example, people who learn to juggle show changes in areas of the brain linked to movement and coordination. Stroke patients can sometimes regain lost abilities as other parts of the brain take over functions. The brain is not fixed. It is constantly reshaping itself. This concept is fascinating because it shows the brain's extraordinary resilience and adaptability. Your experiences, habits, and practice physically alter your neural pathways. Even at older ages, the brain can adapt, learn new skills, and recover from trauma. This reveals the incredible potential for growth and change within each of us. At the same time, neuroplasticity is slightly unsettling because it reminds us how sensitive the brain is. Negative experiences, stress, or repeated harmful behaviors can also shape neural connections in ways that reinforce fear, anxiety, or bad habits. It shows that the mind is powerful but fragile, capable of both growth and deterioration, depending on how it is used.
The extended mind hypothesis. The extended mind hypothesis. Imagine your mind not just inside your skull, but reaching out into the world, using tools, notes, or even a phone to think. This is the idea behind the extended mind hypothesis, proposed by philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers. The hypothesis suggests that objects and tools we use can become part of our cognitive process. Writing in a notebook, using a calculator, or even relying on a calendar can help the mind solve problems and remember information. Our thinking isn't confined to neurons, it extends into the environment. This concept is fascinating because it challenges traditional ideas of self and intelligence. Your mind is not just what you carry in your head, it includes the tools, technology, and surroundings that shape your thinking. It shows how deeply we interact with our environment to think, remember, and create. At the same time, the hypothesis is slightly unsettling. If the mind extends beyond the body, what counts as you? How much of your intelligence or memory is really yours, and how much relies on external aids? It encourages reflection on dependency, technology, and how our modern tools shape cognition.
The placebo effect. Imagine taking a sugar pill, believing it is medicine, and feeling better afterward. This is called the placebo effect, where belief and expectation can influence physical and mental health. Scientists study this effect by giving participants pills or treatments that have no active ingredients. Surprisingly, many people report real improvements in pain, mood, or symptoms. The brain responds to belief, releasing chemicals like endorphins, which can create genuine changes in the body. The placebo effect is fascinating because it shows the mind's power over the body. Expectation, confidence, and perception shape experience in ways we often overlook. It reminds us that healing is not only about medicine, it involves psychology, attention, and the mind-body connection. At the same time, it can feel unsettling. If the brain can influence health so strongly, it suggests that reality is partly shaped by perception. How much of our experience is objective, and how much is colored by belief and expectation? The placebo effect challenges assumptions about control, power, and the subtle interplay between mind and body.
Subliminal influence study. Subliminal influence studies. Imagine seeing an image or word
so quickly that your conscious mind doesn't even notice it. Yet, it can still affect your thoughts, feelings, or actions. This is the idea behind subliminal influence, a fascinating area of psychological research. Researchers study how stimuli presented below the threshold of awareness can shape behavior. For example, flashing words like happy or drink for a fraction of a second can subtly change mood, choices, or preferences. People are influenced without realizing it, showing that the mind constantly processes more than our conscious awareness captures. These studies are fascinating because they reveal the hidden power of perception. Our brains are sensitive, adaptable, and always picking up information from the environment. Even fleeting images or sounds can guide decisions, highlighting the complexity of thought and the subtle ways we interact with the world. At the same time, subliminal influence is slightly unsettling. It reminds us that not all choices are fully conscious. We are subject to subtle nudges that we may never notice, which can shape behavior in ways that feel mysterious or surprising. Awareness of this phenomenon encourages mindfulness and curiosity about how our minds work.
Priming experiments. Imagine walking into a room and seeing words like old, wise, and slow. Later, you might walk more slowly without realizing it. This is the idea behind priming experiments, where subtle cues unconsciously influence our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Psychologists use priming to study how the mind reacts to small, often unnoticed triggers. In one famous study, participants exposed to words related to rudeness interrupted conversations more often. In another, words related to politeness made people act more courteously. These experiments show that our behavior can be guided by influences we don't consciously notice. Priming is fascinating because it reveals the hidden layers of the mind. So much of our thinking and behavior happens automatically, shaped by context, environment, and subtle cues. It reminds us that the brain is constantly processing more than we realize, even outside our awareness. At the same time, priming can feel unsettling. It shows how little control we sometimes have over our actions and decisions. Our thoughts are influenced by tiny, invisible forces in ways we often ignore. Recognizing these influences encourages reflection, mindfulness, and awareness of how our environment shapes our choices. The cognitive reflection test. The cognitive reflection test. Imagine being asked a question that seems easy at first, but the first answer that comes to mind is wrong. This is the idea behind the cognitive reflection test, or CRT, a tool psychologists use to study how people think. The test presents problems that trigger instinctive, automatic answers. For example, a bat and a ball cost $1.10 together. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Many people immediately say 10 cents, but the correct answer is 5 cents. The test measures the ability to pause, reflect, and think carefully instead of relying on gut reactions. The CRT is fascinating because it shows how often humans trust intuition over reason. Our minds are wired for quick judgments to save time and energy, but these instincts can sometimes mislead us. Reflection and slow thinking allow us to see the full picture and make better decisions. At the same time, the test is unsettling because it reveals how easy it is to be tricked by simple problems. Even intelligent people make mistakes if they don't question their first impulse. It highlights a hidden vulnerability in human thought. Our brains are brilliant, but not perfect. The infinite monkey theorem of thought. The infinite monkey theorem of thought. Imagine a monkey sitting at a typewriter, randomly hitting keys forever. Eventually, given infinite time, it could type out the complete works of Shakespeare. This is the famous infinite monkey theorem, a thought experiment about chance, randomness, and probability. Psychologists and philosophers use this idea to explore thought, creativity, and problem-solving. Our minds generate ideas in ways that sometimes feel random, yet given enough time, these thoughts can produce insight, art, or solutions.
The theorem shows that even chaos has potential to create order. The concept is fascinating because it links randomness with possibility. Our brains often wander, generating useless ideas, daydreams, or strange associations. But these wandering thoughts can unexpectedly produce valuable connections or creative breakthroughs. It suggests that mental exploration, even without a clear goal, is important. At the same time, the idea is unsettling. It reminds us that randomness is a fundamental part of existence. Not everything is controlled or predictable. Sometimes events, thoughts, or outcomes arise without reason or intention. The infinite monkey theorem encourages us to embrace uncertainty, allowing the mind to explore freely without rigid expectations.
The split attention paradox. Imagine trying to watch a movie, check your phone, and listen to a friend all at once. You think you can handle it, but in reality, your brain struggles. This is called the split attention paradox, a phenomenon where dividing focus reduces performance even when multitasking feels effective. Researchers study this paradox in classrooms, workplaces, and labs. Participants who try to focus on multiple tasks often remember less, make more mistakes, and feel more stressed. Interestingly, people often believe they are managing fine, but tests show attention is diluted and learning or comprehension suffers. This paradox is fascinating because it reveals limits in human cognition. Our brains are powerful, but not infinite. Focusing deeply on one task produces better results and reduces mental fatigue, while splitting attention creates invisible errors and gaps in memory. This paradox is unsettling because it challenges a modern belief that we can multitask effectively. Phones, notifications, and constant distractions give the illusion of productivity. But true understanding and creativity require singular attention. Awareness of this tendency allows us to approach tasks with calm, mindful focus, improving learning, memory, and
The Ganzfeld Experiments. Imagine sitting in a quiet room wearing headphones and halved ping-pong balls over your eyes. The room is calm, white, and soundless. This is the Ganzfeld procedure, designed to reduce external distractions and study unusual mental phenomena like ESP, extrasensory perception. In these experiments, one person, the sender, focuses on an image or video, while another person, the receiver, is in the sensory-deprived Ganzfeld state. The receiver tries to perceive or describe the target without using normal senses. Some studies report that receivers guess correctly more often than chance would predict, suggesting subtle, mysterious connections between minds. The Ganzfeld studies are fascinating because they explore the limits of perception and consciousness. They ask a mind-bending question: can information transfer occur without conventional communication? Even if results are debated, the experiments reveal how the brain reacts to isolation, focus, and sensory reduction. People often report vivid imagery, intuitive feelings, and altered awareness while in the Ganzfeld state. These experiments are unsettling because they touch on the unknown. They suggest the mind may have hidden capacities we don't fully understand. What we perceive as normal reality may be only a fraction of our potential awareness. The studies encourage humility and curiosity about the mind's mysteries.
Sleep and memory consolidation experiments. Imagine learning something new, like a song, a poem, or a skill. Then you go to sleep. The next day, it feels easier to remember and perform. Scientists call this process memory consolidation, and sleep plays a key role. Researchers study how sleep affects memory by giving participants tasks to learn before bed. During sleep, especially deep sleep and REM stages,
The brain processes information, strengthens connections, and filters unnecessary details. When people wake up, they often remember more accurately and retain skills longer. Sleep is like the brain's filing system, organizing experiences and knowledge. These experiments are fascinating because they reveal the hidden work the brain does while we rest. Memory isn't just about repetition while awake. It's about giving the brain time to process and integrate experiences. Sleep is not just rest for the body. It is essential for learning, creativity, and problem solving. The studies are also unsettling because they highlight how fragile memory can be. Lack of sleep can weaken recall, increase mistakes, and reduce mental clarity. It reminds us that neglecting sleep is not harmless. It impacts cognition, emotion, and even decision-making.
Lucid dream studies. Imagine realizing in the middle of a dream, I am dreaming. Suddenly, you can control the story, fly, or explore a world limited only by imagination. This is called lucid dreaming, and scientists study it to understand consciousness and the mind. Researchers use techniques like reality checks, brainwave monitoring, and dream journals to help people achieve lucid dreams. In the lab, participants can signal that they are aware they are dreaming by moving their eyes in specific patterns. This allows scientists to measure awareness while dreaming, bridging the gap between sleep and wakefulness. Lucid dreaming is fascinating because it shows that consciousness is not limited to waking life. The brain can create vivid, controllable experiences while asleep. Dreams, once mysterious and random, can be guided and examined, revealing how perception, imagination, and self-awareness interact. The studies are also unsettling because they blur the line between reality and imagination. If the brain can create entire worlds in dreams, what does it mean for our understanding of reality? How much of our daily experience is shaped by perception rather than objective truth? Lucid dreams remind us that our sense of reality is both powerful and out-of-body experimentation. Imagine feeling like you are floating above your own body, watching yourself from the ceiling. Strange, right? Scientists call this an out-of-body experience, and researchers have designed experiments to understand how the brain creates this sensation. In these studies, participants wear virtual reality headsets while their real bodies are touched or moved. The brain receives conflicting signals from vision, touch, and balance. Sometimes, participants report feeling as if they are outside their own body, watching themselves from a distance. The experience is vivid, but entirely generated by the brain. These experiments are fascinating because they reveal how perception and self-awareness are constructed. Your sense of you is not just one thing. It is a combination of many signals, stitched together by the brain. When these signals are manipulated, your sense of reality can shift dramatically. Out-of-body research is also unsettling. It shows that even our most basic sense of self is fragile and can be tricked. What we consider reality, what we call me, is not always as solid as we believe. The experiments highlight the mystery of consciousness and the intricate ways the brain shapes experience. The hard problem of consciousness. Close your eyes and notice your thoughts. You feel, imagine, remember, and reflect. But have you ever wondered why these experiences exist at all? This is the heart of the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. The problem asks a simple but deep question. Why do physical brain processes create subjective experiences? Neurons fire, chemicals move, signals travel. But why do these processes produce the feeling of what it is like to see, feel, or think? Science can explain brain activity, but consciousness itself, the experience of being, is harder to grasp. This mystery is fascinating because it touches the core of human existence. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation is deeply personal, yet understanding how and why we experience them remains elusive. It challenges assumptions about reality, mind, and even artificial intelligence. Could a machine ever truly experience anything or just simulate it? The hard problem is unsettling because it shows the limits of knowledge. We can study behavior, measure brain activity, and map neural networks, but the subjective inner world may remain beyond full explanation. This reminds us that some mysteries are not just unsolved.
Chinese room argument. Imagine a person inside a room following instructions to manipulate Chinese symbols. People outside the room pass in questions in Chinese, and the person uses the instructions to produce correct answers, even though they don't understand a word. This thought experiment is called the Chinese room argument, proposed by philosopher John Searle. The argument asks, can a machine appear to understand language without actually thinking or comprehending? A computer might pass the Turing Test, responding correctly to questions, but it may not truly understand the meaning behind the symbols. The Chinese room highlights the difference between syntax, following rules, and semantics, understanding meaning. This idea is fascinating because it questions what consciousness and intelligence really mean. Can thought exist without awareness? Can something appear smart while having no inner experience? It forces us to reconsider assumptions about artificial intelligence, language, and the mind. The argument is unsettling because it challenges the notion that behavior equals understanding. Machines may seem conscious, but comprehension might be absent. It reminds us that intelligence is not just pattern recognition. It involves awareness, context, and subjective experience.
The Turing Test. Imagine chatting with someone online, but you don't know if it's a human or a computer. If you can't tell the difference, the machine has passed the Turing Test, a famous idea proposed by Alan Turing in 1950. The test asks a simple question: can machines think like humans? Researchers use the Turing Test to explore artificial intelligence. A human judges conversations without seeing the responder. If the machine can convince the human that it's human, it passes. Over the decades, computer programs have come close, simulating human language, humor, and emotion. The test isn't perfect, but it highlights the challenges of understanding intelligence, consciousness, and communication. The Turing Test is fascinating because it blurs the line between human and machine. It asks deep questions. Can thought exist without feeling? Can understanding be simulated without awareness? It also makes us reflect on our own nature. What makes us uniquely human? Creativity, empathy, morality, and self-awareness are harder to program, yet they define our experience. The test is also unsettling. As AI becomes more advanced, machines might mimic human behavior convincingly, raising questions about trust, ethics, and responsibility. We may one day interact daily with entities that think differently, yet appear human. Awareness of this possibility encourages careful thought about technology and its role in society.
The Milgram Replications. Imagine being asked to press a button that delivers an uncomfortable shock to someone else, simply because an authority figure tells you to. Stanley Milgram's original experiments showed that many people obeyed, even when it conflicted with their conscience. But what happens when the same experiment is repeated in different cultures? Researchers around the world have replicated Milgram's study in countries like Germany, Australia, and Japan. Surprisingly, results are similar. People often obey authority figures, even when the orders are ethically questionable. The studies reveal a shared human tendency to follow rules and respect authority, regardless of culture. These experiments are unsettling because they show how ordinary people can commit harmful acts when guided by hierarchy. Obedience is a deep
part of human social behavior, helping societies function, but it also makes ethical responsibility fragile. Small pressures, uniforms, or instructions can override personal morals. The findings also spark reflection about modern life. We often obey rules without questioning them, at work, in school, or online. Authority is not inherently bad, but blind obedience can be dangerous. Awareness of this tendency allows us to pause and reflect and make choices based on values rather than just instructions.
The dark triad studies. Imagine meeting someone who seems charming at first, but manipulates others, craves attention, and shows little empathy. Psychologists call these traits the dark triad: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Together, they describe a pattern of socially harmful, yet often successful behavior. Researchers study the dark triad to understand how personality influences actions. Machiavellianism involves manipulation and strategic thinking to achieve goals, often without concern for others. Narcissism is an inflated sense of self-importance and constant need for admiration. Psychopathy involves impulsivity, fearlessness, and lack of empathy or guilt. While extreme cases are rare, many people display some traits in mild ways. The studies are unsettling because they reveal how ordinary people can use charm and cunning to influence others. In workplaces, politics, or social groups, subtle dark triad traits can lead to exploitation, conflict, or harm. Recognizing these patterns helps us understand motives, protect ourselves, and navigate social interactions more wisely. Yet the research also teaches us about balance. Awareness of these traits encourages empathy, careful judgment, and reflection on our own behavior. We can notice when influence, pride, or manipulation appears in our lives, helping us respond thoughtfully instead of reactively.
The Overjustification Effect. Imagine loving to draw as a child, spending hours. The Overjustification Effect. Imagine loving to draw as a child, spending hours creating without anyone paying attention. Later, someone starts giving you money or prizes for your drawings. Suddenly, drawing feels like work, and the joy fades. This is called the Overjustification Effect, a psychological phenomenon where external rewards can reduce intrinsic motivation. Researchers study this effect by giving rewards for activities people already enjoy. Surprisingly, the rewards can make people less interested in continuing the activity once the reward is removed. The mind starts to link the behavior to the reward rather than the enjoyment itself. What was once a natural pleasure becomes a task. The Overjustification Effect is important because it shows how motivation works. Humans are naturally drawn to activities they find meaningful or enjoyable, but external pressures, rewards, or incentives can subtly shift our focus, reducing our engagement and passion. This effect appears in work, school, hobbies, and even relationships. Understanding this phenomenon helps us reflect on our own motivations. Are we doing something because we truly enjoy it, or because we expect a reward, recognition, or approval? Awareness allows us to reconnect.
Prisoner's mask. Imagine putting on a uniform or playing a role. Suddenly, your behavior changes. You act more seriously, aggressively, or obediently than you normally would. This is the idea behind role-playing studies, where researchers explore how social roles shape human behavior. One of the most famous experiments is the Stanford Prison Experiment. Volunteers were assigned roles as guards or prisoners in a simulated prison. Within days, guards became controlling and abusive, while prisoners became passive and stressed. Most people were shocked at how quickly ordinary individuals adopted extreme behaviors simply because of a role. The study shows that context and expectations can shape identity. People often act according to the role they are given, not necessarily according to their own morals or personality. It's a reminder that our surroundings, rules, and social labels influence behavior far more than we might realize. Role-playing experiments are unsettling because they reveal how easily ordinary people can engage in harmful actions. It's not always a matter of character. It's the mask, uniform, or assigned role that can lead someone down a darker path. Awareness of this tendency helps us reflect on the situations we enter and the roles we adopt in life.
The Endowment Effect. Imagine owning a coffee mug. The Endowment Effect. Imagine owning a coffee mug. You've had it for a while, and now it feels special. If someone offered to buy it for a few dollars, you might refuse, even though it has no unique value. This is called the Endowment Effect, a psychological bias where people value things more simply because they own them. Researchers have tested this effect in many ways. In experiments, participants given an object like a mug, pen, or ticket often demanded more money to sell it than they would be willing to pay if they didn't own it. Ownership changes perception, creating a sense of attachment and exaggerating value. The endowment effect is important because it shows how emotions influence decisions. People aren't always rational. Ownership can make us overvalue objects, ideas, or even opportunities. This bias affects markets, personal relationships, and everyday choices. For example, selling a used phone may feel harder than its actual worth, or we may cling to habits that no longer serve us. Understanding the endowment effect helps us pause and reflect before making decisions. Are we valuing something because it's truly useful or meaningful, or simply because it belongs to us? Awareness allows for more balanced choices and reduces the influence of automatic attachment. The invisible influence of framing. Imagine two signs at a store. One says 90% fat-free and the other says 10% fat. They describe the same thing, but most people feel differently about each. This is called framing, a psychological principle where the way information is presented changes how we think and decide. Researchers have studied framing in many contexts. In one experiment, participants were asked to choose between two medical treatments. When outcomes were described as lives saved, people chose differently than when the same outcomes were described as lives lost. Even though the facts didn't change, perception and decisions shifted dramatically. Framing is fascinating because it shows how subtle language, context, and presentation shape human thought. Advertisers, politicians, and media often use framing to influence opinions and choices. Even small changes in wording or emphasis can trigger strong emotional reactions. This phenomenon is unsettling because it reminds us that our decisions aren't always fully rational. The mind is influenced by invisible cues and subtle signals, often without awareness. Understanding framing allows us to pause, reflect, and question why we choose one option over another. Awareness is a small but powerful step toward clearer thinking. Deindividuation. Imagine being in a crowd, your face hidden, your identity unclear. Suddenly, you find yourself cheering loudly, acting boldly, or even doing something you would never do alone. This is called deindividuation, a psychological phenomenon where people lose self-awareness and personal responsibility in groups. Researchers have studied this in many settings. In classic experiments, participants wearing masks or uniforms acted more aggressively or impulsively than when identifiable. Online, anonymity can create similar effects. People post harsh or cruel comments they would never say in person. De-individuation shows that our sense of self can be weakened by context, leading to behaviors driven more by the group than by personal morals. The phenomenon is both fascinating and unsettling. It demonstrates that social environments strongly influence human behavior. In crowds, online forums, or even masked gatherings, people may act in ways that contradict their usual character. The mask doesn't just hide identity, it can temporarily change the person beneath it. Understanding de-individuation helps us reflect on our own behavior. Are we acting authentically, or are we influenced by group pressure or anonymity? Awareness allows us to maintain moral control and self-awareness even in situations that encourage the opposite. The Just World Fallacy Experiments. The Just World Fallacy Experiments.
Imagine seeing someone struggle or fail and thinking they must have done something to deserve it. This is called the just world fallacy, a psychological bias where people believe the world is fair and everyone gets what they deserve. Researchers have studied this effect in many ways. In classic experiments, participants watched videos of people experiencing misfortune. Many assumed the victims had done something wrong. Even when there was no evidence, the brain wants to believe in fairness. It's comforting to think that good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. The just world fallacy is unsettling because it can lead to blame and injustice. It can prevent empathy, as we might unconsciously fault those in difficult situations. It also shapes behavior. People may ignore unfair systems or fail to help others because they assume misfortune is deserved. Yet, understanding this bias is hopeful. By recognizing it, we can pause and question our assumptions. Life is not always fair, and human suffering is often random. Awareness allows us to respond with compassion rather than judgment. The broken windows theory. The broken windows theory. Imagine walking through a neighborhood where a window is broken and left unrepaired. Soon, more windows are broken. Trash accumulates. People feel unsafe. This idea is called the broken windows theory, which suggests that visible signs of disorder encourage more disorder and even crime. The theory was introduced by social scientists James Q. Wilson and George Kelling in the 1980s. They argued that small problems like graffiti, litter, or vandalism can signal that rules aren't enforced. This can lead to bigger issues because people feel that misbehavior is tolerated. In a way, the environment shapes behavior. Researchers tested this idea in real neighborhoods. They found that fixing small issues, cleaning streets, repairing broken windows, or removing graffiti, can reduce larger crimes over time. The experiments show how subtle cues influence human behavior. People respond to their surroundings more than we often realize. The broken windows theory is unsettling because it reveals how quickly disorder spreads and how individual actions interact with society. Neglect or small disruptions can ripple outward, affecting everyone. It reminds us that attention to details, care for our environment, and community.
The empathy gap. Imagine seeing someone in pain. Maybe they are sad, hungry, or hurt. You feel for them, but sometimes it's hard to truly understand their experience. This is called the empathy gap, a psychological phenomenon where people struggle to feel the emotions of others, especially if they're different from their own situation. Researchers study the empathy gap in many ways. For example, someone who is not feeling physical pain may underestimate how much pain another person is experiencing. Or people in a calm mood might struggle to predict how they would act in a stressful situation. This shows that empathy is not automatic. It can be limited by our current feelings, experiences, or perspective. The empathy gap is important because it explains many human behaviors. People may ignore suffering, make unfair decisions, or fail to help even when they want to. It's not always laziness or cruelty. Our brains sometimes simply cannot bridge the gap between self and other. Understanding the empathy gap can help us slow down and reflect. Awareness encourages patience, listening, and imagining the feelings of others more fully. Small acts of conscious effort, asking, listening, or noticing can reduce the gap.
The crowd mind. Imagine standing in a large crowd. Suddenly, a small spark of panic spreads, and people start pushing and running without thinking clearly. The crowd feels alive, almost like a single mind. This is the idea behind Gustave Le Bon's crowd psychology, which explores how individuals behave differently in groups. Le Bon suggested that in crowds, people often lose self-control, rational thinking, and personal responsibility. They follow emotions, impulses, and the behavior of others. Scientists have tested these ideas in modern experiments, showing that people in groups can act in ways they would never consider alone, cheering, rioting, or panicking. Crowd behavior is fascinating because it shows the tension between individuality and collective influence. In a group, identity can dissolve. People may conform to social pressure, follow leaders blindly, or adopt extreme behaviors without fully realizing it. This is why understanding crowds matters. It affects everything from protests and markets to social media trends and emergencies. The science of crowds also shows that emotional contagion spreads fast. Fear, anger, or excitement can ripple through hundreds or thousands of people in seconds. Even rational individuals are not immune. Awareness of this phenomenon can help us navigate group situations more calmly and consciously.
The moral machine. The moral machine. Imagine a self-driving car speeding down a street. Suddenly, two paths appear. One path could hit one person, the other could hit 5. What should the car do? This is the modern version of the classic trolley problem, and researchers use it to study how AI makes moral decisions. The moral machine is an online experiment where thousands of people around the world make choices in simulated traffic dilemmas. The goal is to understand how humans weigh life, safety, and responsibility when designing AI. Should the car protect passengers at all costs? Should it minimize total harm? Or should it follow strict rules no matter what? What makes this study unsettling is how complex morality becomes when machines are involved. Unlike humans, AI doesn't feel guilt, fear, or empathy. It must follow programmed rules, which may conflict with human values. Yet humans disagree on what is right. So teaching morality to machines is tricky. The experiment also makes us question our own ethics. If we choose one path, are we fair? Are we biased toward age, social role, or number of people? Even in a simulation, moral decisions reveal our priorities and assumptions.
The Stanford Marshmallow Test. Imagine a child sitting at a table with a single marshmallow in front of them. The experimenter says, "You can eat this now or wait 15 minutes, and I'll give you 2. This is the famous Stanford Marshmallow Test, designed to study delayed gratification, the ability to resist a small reward now for a bigger one later. Psychologists wanted to understand self-control. Children who waited for the second marshmallow tended to have better outcomes later in life, like higher academic achievement, healthier habits, and better social skills. The test shows that the ability to delay pleasure is linked to long-term success and well-being. But the experiment is more than just marshmallows. It's about how humans manage impulses and make choices over time. Waiting isn't easy. Temptation is immediate, and our brains naturally seek quick rewards. Learning self-control is a struggle shaped by environment, personality, and guidance from adults. The test is also surprising because it reveals how even small decisions can matter. Choosing patience over instant gratification affects more than one moment. It can shape habits, confidence, and resilience. It's a reminder that our brains are wired to seek comfort now, but growth often comes from holding back and
Implicit bias studies. Imagine walking into a room and instantly forming opinions about the people there without realizing it. These instant thoughts about race, gender, age, or appearance are called implicit biases. They are automatic, unconscious judgments that influence how we act and think. Psychologists study implicit bias using tools like the Implicit Association Test, or IAT. In one common example, participants quickly match positive or negative words with faces of different races. Results often reveal hidden preferences or prejudices, even when people consciously believe in equality. This shows that our minds can hold beliefs we are not aware of. Implicit bias is powerful because it affects real-world decisions in hiring, law enforcement, education, or medicine. These automatic judgments can shape who gets opportunities, who gets trusted, and who gets overlooked. Most people don't act on them intentionally. They are subtle, hidden, and often unexamined. Understanding implicit bias is unsettling, but also hopeful. Once we become aware of these hidden tendencies, we can take steps to counteract them. Awareness allows us to slow down, reflect, and make more fair,
conscious decisions. It reminds us that our brains are always forming shortcuts, but we are capable of overriding them with thought and care.
The halo effect. Imagine the halo effect. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. They smile, look confident, and seem attractive. Suddenly, you assume they are also smart, kind, and talented, even though you don't really know them. This is called the halo effect, a psychological bias where one positive trait influences how we perceive everything else about a person. Researchers have found that the halo effect affects many areas of life. Attractive people are often judged as more intelligent, capable, or trustworthy. Teachers may grade good-looking students more leniently. Employers might favor attractive job candidates. Even in everyday interactions, our brains unconsciously fill in assumptions based on one striking feature. The halo effect is unsettling because it shows how easily our judgments can be fooled. We like to think we evaluate people fairly, but often our perception is influenced by appearances, first impressions, or one standout quality. It reveals how subjective and fragile human judgment can be. This bias also highlights the power of attention. What we noticed first, beauty, confidence, or charm, can overshadow flaws or weaknesses. Our brains seek shortcuts, making decisions faster, but sometimes at the cost of accuracy. Being aware of this tendency can help us slow down and think more critically about how we judge others. The banality of evil. Imagine a man. The banality of evil. Imagine a man doing terrible things, but he insists he is just following orders. This was Adolf Eichmann, a key figure in the Holocaust. Philosopher Hannah Arendt studied him during his trial and introduced the idea of the banality of evil. She suggested that ordinary people could commit horrifying acts, not out of hatred, but out of obedience and thoughtless compliance. Eichmann wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He wasn't overtly cruel or sadistic. Instead, he followed rules, completed tasks, and avoided thinking about the consequences. His case shocked the world because it showed that evil does not always look monstrous. It can appear as routine, bureaucratic, and even ordinary. Psychologists like Stanley Milgram explored this idea further with obedience experiments. People often follow authority, even when it conflicts with their own morals. They may harm others simply because someone in power instructs them to act. This raises unsettling questions. How much responsibility lies with the individual? How easily can social systems encourage ordinary people to participate in harmful acts? The banality of evil teaches us to stay aware of our own choices. Obedience can be dangerous when it overrides conscience, empathy, and independent thinking. Ordinary actions, repeated without reflection, can have extraordinary consequences. The door-in-the-face effect. Imagine the door-in-the-face effect. Imagine someone asks you for a huge favor, like lending them a large sum of money. You immediately say no. Then they ask for a smaller favor, like borrowing a small amount. Surprisingly, you feel more likely to say yes this time. This is called the door-in-the-face effect, a psychological principle that shows how people respond to requests. Psychologists designed experiments to test this idea. Participants were first asked to do something large and unreasonable. When they refused, they were asked for something smaller. Most agreed to the smaller request, even if they would have originally refused it outright. The effect works because humans naturally want to appear fair and cooperative. When someone backs down, we feel obligated to compromise. The door-in-the-face effect teaches us about influence, persuasion, and social pressure. It shows how the order and size of requests can shape decisions, often without us noticing. Salespeople, fundraisers, and negotiators use this technique all the time. It's not about manipulation alone. It's also about how social expectations and the desire to appear reasonable guide behavior. This effect can feel unsettling because it reveals how easily our choices can be influenced by subtle strategies. Even when we think we are making independent decisions, our brains respond to cues, context, and social dynamics. Awareness is the key to maintaining control. Foot in the door experiment. Imagine someone asks you to do a small favor, like signing a petition. You agree. Later, they ask for a bigger favor, like donating money or volunteering hours. You might feel pressured to say yes again. This is the idea behind the foot in the door experiment, a study in human compliance and persuasion. Psychologists wanted to understand why people often agree to larger requests after first saying yes to something small. In experiments, participants who agreed to small, harmless actions were much more likely to agree to bigger actions later, compared to those who were never asked to do the small task. It showed that commitment grows gradually, and our brains want to stay consistent. The experiment is important because it reveals how easily people's behavior can be influenced. Companies, charities, and even social groups use this principle to shape decisions. On a deeper level, it shows how small choices can snowball into larger actions, sometimes without us fully realizing it. The foot in the door effect also raises questions about free will. How much are our decisions truly independent? Are we making choices, or are we being subtly guided by small steps that lead us further than we intended? It's unsettling, but also fascinating to see how tiny actions can chain into larger behavior. Tragedy of the commons. Imagine a shared pasture where everyone can let their animals graze. Each farmer wants more animals to earn more food or money. At first, it seems fine, but as each person adds more animals, the grass begins to disappear. Eventually, the pasture is ruined and everyone suffers. This is called the tragedy of the commons. The concept was introduced by ecologist Garrett Hardin in the 1960s. It explains a simple but troubling truth. When people act in their own self-interest without thinking about the group, shared resources get destroyed. The commons can be land, water, air, or even public trust and social systems. This idea isn't just about farms. It shows up in real life all around us. Overfishing oceans, littering parks, wasting electricity, or ignoring climate change. When everyone takes what they want without limits, the resource eventually collapses. The tragedy is that cooperation is often more beneficial in the long term, but self-interest feels easier in the moment. Psychologists and economists also study how people make choices in these situations. Some experiments show that when people communicate, trust one another, and see fairness, they cooperate more. But when anonymity, greed, or short-term gain dominate.
The endless shock room. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, ready to answer questions. Every time you get an answer wrong, small shock runs through your body. It's not deadly, but it stings. You ask to stop. The experimenter says, "Please continue." Shock after shock, the experiment goes on. This was the reality for participants in Milgram's obedience experiments, and it raises questions about human limits and ethics. Milgram wanted to see how far people would go when obeying authority. Volunteers believed they were giving real shocks to someone in another room. Some went up to dangerous levels, even when they thought the other person was in serious pain. What's disturbing is that ordinary people, teachers, clerks, students, followed instructions, trusting the authority figure over their own conscience. This experiment is not just about shocks. It's about the ethics of repetition and human obedience. How long can someone follow orders against their morals? How easily do ordinary humans cross moral lines under pressure? And how much responsibility lies with the person giving orders versus the person following them? It's chilling because it shows the dark side of compliance. Humans are capable of harming others, not out of malice, but out of trust, fear, or habit. It forces us to reflect. How do we balance obedience with morality in our daily lives? The horror of lobotomies. Imagine a surgery where a doctor inserts a tool into your brain. The horror of lobotomies. Imagine a surgery where a doctor inserts a tool into your brain to fix your emotions or behavior. That was the reality of lobotomies. a shocking procedure used in the mid-20th century. Doctors believed that cutting connections in the frontal lobes could cure mental illness, from depression to anxiety. At first, lobotomies seemed like a miracle. Patients who were once agitated or aggressive became calm and quiet. Families were relieved. Doctors claimed success. But soon, the truth emerged. Many patients lost their personalities, creativity, and ability to feel deep emotions. Some became passive, unable to care for themselves, while others experienced seizures or permanent brain damage. The lobotomy is a chilling reminder of how little we once understood the brain. It also highlights the dangers of trying to control the mind with force rather than care. The procedure was praised as scientific progress, yet it caused immense suffering for thousands of people. Ethically, lobotomies forced society to ask tough questions. How far should medicine go to change behavior? Is it ever okay to harm the mind to help someone? The answers are still debated today, especially in discussions about neurosurgery, psychiatric treatment, and consent. Sleep paralysis and night terrors. Have you ever woken up? Sleep paralysis and night terrors. Have you ever woken up and found that your body won't move? Maybe you feel a heavy weight on your chest, shadows in the room, or a sense of danger that isn't really there. This terrifying experience is called sleep paralysis, and it's more common than you might think. During sleep, your body cycles through REM, or rapid eye movement, when dreaming is most vivid. Normally, your brain paralyzes your muscles so you don't act out dreams. Sometimes, though, your mind wakes up before your body does. The result? You're conscious, but frozen, trapped between dream and reality. People often report seeing figures, feeling pressure, or sensing a presence. Night terrors are similar, but happen mostly in children. They include screaming, panic, and confusion while still asleep. Neither sleep paralysis nor night terrors are dangerous physically, but they can feel deeply real and leave lasting fear. Scientists study these experiences to understand how the brain separates reality from dreams. Sleep deprivation, stress, and irregular sleep schedules make these events more likely. What's eerie is that the brain can create vivid hallucinations while the body is frozen. You are awake, yet completely under the control of your sleeping mind. The Nocebo Effect. Imagine taking a harmless pill, being told it might. The Nocebo Effect. Imagine taking a harmless pill, being told it might make you sick, and then suddenly feeling headaches, nausea, or fatigue. The pill didn't cause it. Your belief did. This strange phenomenon is called the Nocebo Effect, the darker cousin of the placebo effect. Researchers have shown that the mind has incredible power over the body. In experiments, volunteers given sugar pills were warned about side effects. Many reported real pain or discomfort, even though the pill was harmless. Their expectations triggered stress hormones and physical responses, creating symptoms out of belief. The nocebo effect is unsettling because it shows how thoughts can shape reality. Just the anticipation of harm can activate the nervous system, increase heart rate, and even worsen real medical conditions. Your mind doesn't distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. It reacts the same way. This effect also appears in everyday life. Hearing a rumor that a place is dangerous, worrying about your health, or expecting failure can create real consequences. Stress, anxiety, and fear can become self-fulfilling. Our beliefs aren't just ideas. They are forces that can hurt or heal us.
The haunted mind. The haunted mind. The human brain is powerful, but sometimes it tricks us into seeing or hearing things that are not real. These experiences are called hallucinations. They can feel very real, even though nothing is actually there. Scientists have studied this phenomenon for decades to understand how and why it happens. One famous study involved sleep-deprived people.
After staying awake for many hours or even days, some began to see strange shapes, hear voices, or feel like someone was standing near them. Their tired brains were creating false signals, almost like dreams leaking into waking life. Another experiment placed people in complete darkness or sensory deprivation. With no sights, sounds, or touch for a long time, the brain began to fill the gaps with its own creations. Some saw lights, faces, or entire scenes. Others heard music or whispers. The mind, desperate for input, built its own reality. Hallucinations aren't always caused by experiments, though. They can also happen because of stress, trauma, drugs, or medical conditions. What makes them fascinating is how real they feel. To the person experiencing them, it isn't imagination, it's reality. These studies remind us that our perception is not perfect. The brain is both our guide and our deceiver. What we see, fear of the crowd. Imagine standing in a crowd, everyone around you panicking. You don't know why, but suddenly fear spreads like wildfire. This is the essence of mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon where fear and anxiety jump from person to person. Throughout history, mass hysteria has caused incredible chaos. In the 1600s, towns believed witches were everywhere, and people accused neighbors of dark magic. In modern times, it happens too, like rumors of toxins in food or contagious diseases causing panic before there's proof. Scientists have studied why crowds sometimes act irrationally, even when individuals would normally stay calm. One key idea is that humans are social creatures. We take cues from those around us, especially in uncertain situations. If others seem scared, our brain interprets the situation as dangerous. Even if it isn't, fear becomes contagious, creating a loop. One person panics, others follow, and soon reason disappears. Mass hysteria is unsettling because it shows how fragile perception can be. Rational thinking, morality, and self-control can all vanish when we are swept up in a group's fear. It's not just stories or history, it's a mirror of our instincts. In a crowd, the brain sometimes...
The CIA's MK-Ultra experiments. Imagine a government program so secretive that almost no one knew it existed. Its goal? To control minds. This was MK-Ultra, a series of experiments run by the CIA in the 1950s and 60s. The aim was shocking. Test whether drugs, hypnosis, and other techniques could manipulate human thought and behavior. Volunteers, and sometimes unknowing citizens, were given LSD, barbiturates, and other powerful substances. Some were subjected to sensory deprivation, extreme stress, or confusing instructions. The scientists wanted to see if the mind could be broken, rewritten, or programmed to follow commands. The results were chilling. Many participants suffered long-term psychological damage. Some experienced paranoia, hallucinations, or memory loss. Some never fully recovered. And the most disturbing part? Much of this research was hidden, and the people in charge often ignored ethics, treating humans like lab rats. MK-Ultra reveals a terrifying truth about the mind. It is malleable, fragile, and vulnerable to manipulation. Even a strong personality can be destabilized under the right conditions. The experiments remind us how power, secrecy, and science can combine to harm the very people meant to benefit from knowledge. The Harlow Monkey Experiments. Imagine a baby. The Harlow Monkey Experiments. Imagine a baby monkey, alone, hungry, scared. A scientist places two mothers in the cage, one made of wire that gives milk, and one soft and fuzzy but with no food. Which one will the baby monkey choose? The answer is haunting. Almost every time, the monkey clings to the soft mother, seeking comfort over survival. This was the core of the Harlow Monkey Experiments in the 1950s and 60s. Psychologist Harry Harlow
wanted to understand what really matters for development. Food or love? What he discovered shocked the world. Comfort and emotional connection aren't just nice, they are essential. Without it, baby monkeys became withdrawn, anxious, and socially damaged, even when they had enough food. The experiments revealed a deep truth about humans, too. We are not machines that survive on basic needs alone. Emotional touch, comfort, and care shape the brain, personality, and ability to connect with others. Neglect or isolation can cause long-term psychological damage. Harlow's work is unsettling because it shows how fragile early life really is. A lack of love can scar as much as physical danger, and yet it's also hopeful. Warmth, kindness, and connection can heal and protect. Stress hormones and the brain. Think about a time when you felt really stressed. Maybe a test, a fight with a friend, or a big decision. Your heart races, your hands sweat, your mind goes a million miles an hour. That feeling comes from stress hormones, chemicals your body releases to help you survive danger. The most famous stress hormone is cortisol. When you face a threat, your body floods your bloodstream with it. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tense, and your brain focuses on immediate survival. It's your body's natural alarm system. For short bursts, this is good. It helps you run from danger, solve problems fast, or perform under pressure. But here's the scary part. Chronic stress keeps cortisol high all the time. Your brain starts to suffer. Memory suffers, focus fades, and your emotional control weakens. The hippocampus, a key area for learning and memory, can even shrink under long-term stress. The amygdala, which controls fear, becomes overactive. Suddenly, normal situations feel dangerous. Psychologists have studied how stress changes not just the brain, but behavior. People under constant stress can make irrational choices, misread social signals, or even lash out at others. It's like the brain is stuck in survival mode, even when the threat is gone. The prisoner's dilemma. Imagine you and a friend are caught for a crime. You're both dragged into separate rooms. The police give you a choice. If you stay silent and your friend also stays silent, you'll both get a light punishment. But if you betray your friend and confess while they stay quiet, you walk free, and your friend takes the full sentence. If you both betray each other, you both get punished badly. This setup is called the prisoner's dilemma, and it's one of the most famous psychology and game theory experiments. On the surface, it's just a problem about crime and punishment. But in reality, it's about trust, survival, and human nature. Most people think they'd stay loyal, but under pressure, betrayal is often the safe choice. Why? Because humans fear being the one left behind. The dilemma shows that cooperation is fragile. Even when working together would give the best result, fear of betrayal pushes people towards selfishness. Researchers use the prisoner's dilemma to study everything from friendships and business deals to politics and global war. It reveals a dark truth. Sometimes humans destroy each other's chances of happiness just because they can't fully trust. Even scarier, the dilemma never really ends. In daily life, whether it's ghosting someone, cheating in a game, or breaking a promise.
The cold water pain experiment. Imagine plunging your hand into a bucket of ice-cold water. At first, it feels sharp, almost refreshing. But within seconds, the sting becomes unbearable. Your skin screams, your muscles ache, and your brain begs you to pull away. This simple act became the basis of one of psychology's most revealing studies, the cold water pain experiment, also called the cold pressor test. This experiment asked people to hold their hands in icy water for as long as possible. The researchers weren't being cruel. They were testing how humans feel, tolerate, and remember pain. And the results? They were deeply unsettling. Participants discovered that pain is not just about the body, it's about the mind. Some people lasted only a few seconds, while others endured for minutes. But here's the twist. When asked later how painful the experience was, their memories didn't always match what actually happened.
In fact, the way the pain ended mattered more than the pain itself. If the experiment ended suddenly with sharp suffering, people recalled it as far worse. But if the pain faded slowly, even though they endured longer, they remembered it as more bearable. This is called the peak-end rule. We judge entire experiences, not by how long they last, but by how they end. It means your worst memory of pain, or even joy, might not be the full truth. It's just the highlight reel your brain edited to.
White room isolation tests. Picture this: a room with no color, no sound, no smell, just endless white walls, a white floor, and white ceiling. You are placed inside, with nothing to do, no one to talk to, and no sense of time. At first, it feels boring, but slowly, something strange begins to happen. This is the world of the white room isolation tests. Scientists have long studied what happens when people are cut off from all normal stimulation. In one famous experiment, volunteers were paid to stay in perfectly white rooms, with food slipped in quietly and no clocks to tell time. Some thought it would be easy. Just relax, nap, and wait. But the human brain doesn't work that way. Our minds are built to process sights, sounds, movement, and change. Without it, the brain begins to fill in the gaps. After a few hours, participants reported losing track of time. After a day, they started hearing phantom sounds, buzzing, whispers, even music that wasn't there. After several days, hallucinations appeared. Faces in the walls, objects floating in the air, even entire imaginary conversations. Why? Because when the outside world is silent, the brain creates its own chaos. Too much isolation doesn't calm the mind, it unravels it. The white room tests are a reminder of how fragile we are when stripped of the world around us. It's not just about loneliness, it's about reality itself slipping away.
Sleep deprivation torture studies. Close your eyes and imagine sleep deprivation torture studies. Close your eyes and imagine not being allowed to sleep. One night missed feels awful, your head heavy, your thoughts blurry. Now stretch that into days. This is the world of sleep deprivation experiments, some of the most haunting studies in psychology. In the mid-20th century, researchers wanted to understand how long humans could stay awake. Volunteers were kept up with lights, noise, or constant interruption. At first, the effects seemed simple: yawning, trouble focusing, mood swings. But soon, things grew terrifying. After just 2 or 3 days without sleep, participants began to hallucinate. They saw shadows moving in empty rooms. They heard voices whispering their names. By the 5th day, some forgot who they were, losing track of time and reality itself. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was survival. Why does this happen? Sleep is when the brain cleans itself, sorting memories, repairing the body, and restoring balance. Without it, the brain short circuits, mixing dreams with waking life. The result is paranoia, delusion, and in extreme cases, total breakdown. Sleep deprivation has also been used as torture. Instead of physical pain, captors kept prisoners awake for days on end. Victims reported it was worse than beatings, the mind collapsing in slow motion, reality bending until nothing made sense. What makes it so terrifying is how fragile we really are. Something as simple as missing sleep can turn the strongest person into a trembling shadow of themselves. Your bed isn't
The darkness experiment. Imagine sitting in a room with no light, no sound, no touch, no smell, nothing to see, nothing to hear, just you floating in silence. At first, it feels peaceful, like meditation, but after minutes stretch into hours, something strange begins to happen. This is the world of sensory deprivation. In the 1950s, psychologists began experimenting with sensory deprivation tanks. Small, dark chambers filled with warm salt water where people floated weightlessly. The idea was to study what happens when the brain is cut off from outside input. At first, participants reported relaxation, even euphoria, but soon their minds began to play tricks. With no sights or sounds to anchor reality, the brain starts making its own. People reported hearing voices, seeing flashing lights, and even feeling things that weren't there. Some said they felt like they left their bodies. Others described deep fear, like they were dissolving into nothingness. The mind, desperate for stimulation, created entire hallucinations. Why does this happen? Our senses are like fuel for the brain. Without them, the brain begins to eat itself, pulling images and sounds from memory, dreams, and imagination. What's fascinating and terrifying is how quickly reality can fall apart when the outside world goes silent. Today, sensory deprivation tanks are marketed as spa treatments, promising calm and focus. But the same environment, if extended too long, can lead to paranoia, anxiety, or even madness. In darkness, the line between dream and reality,
The Uncanny Valley. Have you ever seen a robot or a CGI character that looked almost human, but not quite? Something about it felt wrong, not scary like a monster, but unsettling, like your brain couldn't relax. This feeling is called the Uncanny Valley. The idea comes from robotics and psychology. As machines or animations become more human-like, we usually like them more. A cartoon character with big eyes feels cute, not creepy. But once the design gets too close to real, skin, eyes, movements, but still imperfect, our comfort suddenly drops. That dip in comfort is the valley. Why does this happen? Some scientists think it's about survival. Long ago, humans needed to quickly spot sickness, death, or danger in faces. A body that looked alive but moved strangely could mean disease or even death. That same instinct may now get triggered by lifelike robots or digital humans. Another theory says it's about identity. Seeing something almost human makes us question, what makes us real? If a robot looks like me, what separates it from me? The Uncanny Valley is everywhere today. Video games, AI avatars, realistic dolls, even deep fakes. Sometimes it's subtle, like when a virtual character blinks at the wrong speed. Other times it's chilling, like a robot that smiles just a little too long. Our brains notice, even if we can't explain why. Fear of the unknown. Humans can handle almost anything except not knowing. Think about waiting for test results or checking if someone texted back. The unknown feels heavier than bad news itself. Psychologists call this the fear of uncertainty, and it's one of the most powerful forces in the human mind. In studies, researchers showed that people would often prefer a guaranteed bad outcome over an uncertain one. For example, if you had to choose between getting a small electric shock right now or maybe getting a bigger shock later, most people would pick the certain pain. Why? Because at least you know. Waiting for the unknown twists the brain into knots. The fear of uncertainty comes from evolution. Imagine being a hunter thousands of years ago. If the bushes were rustling, was it a tiger or just the wind? Not knowing could be deadly. The brain learned to treat uncertainty as danger. Even today, our bodies react. Heart rates rise, stress hormones flood, and we get restless. This explains why so much of modern life, scrolling news feeds, checking emails, binge-watching, keeps us hooked. We crave answers, closure, or at least clarity. The unknown feels unbearable, so we fill the silence with distractions. But here's the eerie twist. Most of life is unknown. The future, relationships, even our own thoughts. Nothing is fully certain. Living means walking through fog every single day. We pretend to control it, but deep down, we know we can't.
The terror management theory. Every human shares one secret thought, whether we admit it or not. One day, we will die. Most of the time, we push this thought away. We scroll, laugh, work, and plan as if life stretches on forever. But somewhere, deep in the mind, the awareness of death is always waiting. Terror management theory, or TMT, explores what happens when this awareness rises to the surface. The theory was developed in the 1980s by psychologists who wondered, if we know we are temporary, how do we keep functioning? Their answer: we build psychological shields. Culture, religion, politics, even personal beliefs become defense systems. They give life meaning, purpose, and the illusion of permanence. For example, if you believe in heaven, legacy, or even just make an impact, you feel less terrified of death. Experiments showed that when people are reminded of death through news,
writing prompts, or even walking past a graveyard. They react in strong and strange ways. They cling harder to their cultural values, punish outsiders more harshly, and show stronger loyalty to their group. It's like being reminded of mortality flips a hidden switch inside the brain. Protect my tribe, my beliefs, my world. The unsettling part is that much of human conflict, wars, prejudice, nationalism, may be fueled by this silent fear of death. We don't just fear dying, we fear being meaningless, so we fight to prove our lives matter.
The learned helplessness trap. Imagine you're trapped in a room with no doors and no windows. A loud, painful alarm goes off every few minutes. And no matter what you do, scream, run, push, cry, you can't stop it. After a while, you stop trying. You just sit there and take it, even though you hate it. That feeling, giving up because nothing you do matters, is at the heart of learned helplessness. In the 1960s, psychologist Martin Seligman studied this with dogs. He placed them in a situation where they were shocked through the floor. Some dogs had a lever they could press to stop the shocks, but others had no way out. For the dogs with no escape, something terrifying happened. Later, when they were moved into a cage where escape was possible just by hopping over a low barrier, they didn't even try. They just lay down and whimpered, accepting the shocks as if freedom wasn't real. This experiment showed how powerful hopelessness can be. When living beings are trained to believe their actions don't matter, they stop fighting, even when escape is right there. The same happens with people. It can show up in toxic jobs, abusive relationships, or even in school. If someone learns that nothing they do changes their situation, they stop trying, even when opportunities appear later. The dark side of this? Systems of power, governments, workplaces, even social groups can unconsciously or deliberately create learned helplessness, keeping people stuck. But there's also a hopeful twist. Once you recognize this trap, you can fight it. You can relearn that your actions do matter.
The Rat Park study. When most people think about addiction, they imagine it as a chemical trap. The story goes like this. If you use a drug like heroin or cocaine, you get hooked because the drug itself rewires your brain. But in the late 1970s, a psychologist named Bruce Alexander decided to test if that story was really the whole truth. His idea led to one of the most famous and unsettling studies in psychology, the Rat Park Experiment. At the time, scientists usually tested addiction with rats kept in small, empty cages. Inside these cages, the rats were given 2 water bottles, one with plain water and another with drug-laced water. The caged rats almost always preferred the drugged water, often drinking until they overdosed. It seemed like proof that drugs were impossible to resist. But Alexander wondered, what if it wasn't the drug alone? What if the cage, the isolation, the emptiness played a role? So he built Rat Park, a large, enriched space where rats had toys, tunnels, food, and most importantly, other rats to play with. In this colorful, social world, the same 2 water bottles were placed, and the result was shocking. The rats in Rat Park almost never touched the drugged water. They preferred the normal water. They thrived. The experiment suggested something dark but hopeful. Maybe addiction isn't just about chemicals. It's also about disconnection, loneliness, and environment. If even rats choose drugs only when trapped in cages, what does that say about humans living in invisible cages of stress, isolation?
Conditioned fear. Fear can be taught, but it can also be unlearned. That's the strange story behind the Little Peter experiment, one of psychology's earliest studies on how fear works. In the 1920s, a child named Peter had a strong fear of rabbits. Just the sight of the animal made him cry and panic. Psychologist Mary Cover Jones wanted to see if this fear could be undone. Instead of making the rabbit scarier, she tried something new. She paired the rabbit with something Peter actually loved, food. At first, Peter sat far away from the rabbit while eating his favorite snack. The animal was placed at a safe distance, not close enough to cause panic. Slowly, over many sessions, the rabbit was brought closer and closer. Each time, Peter had his comforting food right in front of him. Eventually,
something surprising happened. His fear faded. The rabbit no longer seemed terrifying. It became just another part of the room. This experiment was powerful because it showed how emotions are not fixed. Fear, even deep fear, can be reshaped. The mind can rewire itself, turning terror into calmness simply by pairing something scary with something safe and familiar. But here's the haunting part. If fear can be unlearned, it also means many of the fears we carry, spiders, darkness, rejection, were learned in the first place. They were planted through experiences or conditioning. Which ones are truly yours, and which ones were taught to you?
The Ship of Theseus. Imagine an old wooden ship. Over the years, one board rots and is replaced, then another, then another. Decades later, every single piece of wood has been swapped out. Here's the haunting question. Is it still the same ship? This puzzle is called the Ship of Theseus, an ancient thought experiment that still shakes people today. At its heart, it asks, what makes something or someone the same over time? If all the parts are gone, but the form remains, is it still it? Or has it become something new? Now think about your own body. Every 7 to 10 years, nearly every cell inside you is replaced. The you from childhood is physically gone. Even your memories shift and rewrite themselves as you age. So, are you the same person you were at 5 years old? Or are you someone else who only remembers being that child? The Ship of Theseus is not just about ships. It's about identity, memory, and what it means to stay you. Some philosophers say identity is the story we tell about ourselves, not the parts we're made of. Others say the question has no real answer. It's just a reminder of how fragile self really is. The eerie twist? Imagine if someone kept all the old boards from the original ship and rebuilt it. Now there are two ships. Which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Which one is off?
Infinite selves hypothesis. What if you are not just you? What if, in a strange way, there are infinite versions of you, each living out a different path? This idea is called the infinite selves hypothesis, and it's one of the most unsettling yet fascinating theories about identity. Think about every choice you've ever made. Maybe you chose to stay home instead of going out. Maybe you picked one school, one job, one relationship, and not another. According to some interpretations of quantum physics and philosophy, there could be other yous out there, one who took every other possible path. In one reality, you became a famous musician, and another, you never survived childhood, and yet another, you're living almost the exact same life, but one tiny detail is different, maybe your favorite color or the people you know. The eerie part is this: if infinite versions of you exist, then what does you even mean? Are you the one experiencing this moment, or just one thread among billions of possible lives? Does your sense of self stretch across all those versions, or is it trapped in this single timeline? Some psychologists use this idea as a thought experiment. It forces us to question identity, choice, and fate. If every decision branches into new realities, then free will feels both powerful and meaningless. You matter, but so does every alternate you.
The phantom limb pain studies. Imagine losing an arm or a leg, only to keep feeling it long after it's gone. Some people who go through amputations experience something chilling called phantom limb pain. Even though the limb is no longer there, the brain continues to send signals as if it still exists. Victims say they feel itching, burning, or even crushing pain in a body part that no longer exists. Why does this happen? The answer lies in the brain's map of the body. Deep inside your mind, there's a kind of blueprint that represents every finger, toe, and joint. When a limb is removed, the brain's map doesn't update right away. It's like a ghost of the body lingers in the nervous system. The signals get confused, creating sensations in places that no longer exist. In the 1990s, a scientist named V.S. Ramachandran came up with a strange but brilliant experiment. He built a simple mirror box,
Patients would put their healthy limb inside and watch its reflection, tricking the brain into thinking the missing limb was moving again. Shockingly, this simple illusion often relieved the pain. By seeing the mirror reflection, the brain rewrote its body map, reducing the phantom suffering. The studies show something eerie about human consciousness. Much of what we feel isn't about the outside world at all. It's about the brain's interpretation of it. If the brain's map can keep a ghost limb alive, what else might it be fabricating? Could parts of our reality, even our sense of self, even our emotions, also be illusions carefully drawn by the brain?
The memory wars of the 1990s. In the 1990s, psychology faced one of its darkest battles. It wasn't about drugs or machines or even new brain scans. It was about memory itself. This period became known as the memory wars. At the time, some therapists believed they could help patients recover hidden or repressed memories, often memories of trauma that the brain supposedly buried deep inside. Patients were encouraged to search their minds through hypnosis, guided imagery, or intense therapy sessions. Many of them began to remember shocking things: childhood abuse, secret cults, even bizarre conspiracies. But here's the terrifying part. Many of these memories weren't real. Psychologists discovered that the techniques used in therapy could actually plant new memories instead of uncovering old ones. The brain doesn't store memories like files in a computer. It's more like clay, soft, flexible, and easy to reshape. Under pressure, people often created vivid stories that felt true even though they were false. Families were torn apart. Court cases exploded. Some people went to prison because of these so-called recovered memories. Others were shunned forever. And yet, scientific studies kept showing how fragile memory really is. You could convince someone they got lost in a mall as a child or met Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, things that never happened, simply by repeating the suggestion. The memory wars raised an eerie question. If we can't fully trust our memories, then how much of our identity is real? After all, we are shaped by what we think happened to us. If memory is unstable, maybe our very sense of self is unstable too. Take a moment to reflect. What if some of your most emotional memories aren't accurate at all?
False memory of love. Think back to your very first crush. Maybe it felt magical, like the world lit up when a person walked into the room. Now ask yourself, was it really that magical, or has your memory polished it over time? Love is powerful, but it's also one of the easiest emotions for the brain to rewrite. This is the false memory of love. Psychologists have studied how people remember relationships, and the findings are unsettling. Often, couples remember their first meeting differently. One might say it was instant sparks. The other remembers it as awkward and plain. Memories of love aren't like videos we replay. They're stories we edit again and again. Each time we recall them, they can shift a little. Why does this happen? Because love isn't just about what happened, it's about what we wanted to happen. When a relationship ends badly, we sometimes erase the good parts to protect ourselves. Or when we're still in love, we exaggerate the happy parts and smooth over the flaws. Our brain edits love to fit the story we need at the time. This raises haunting questions. Do we ever remember love as it really was? Or are we always living in a love story partly made up by our imagination? If so, maybe we're not in love with the person, but with the story we've created about them. Take a moment to reflect. What if the butterflies you remember weren't as strong as you think? What if your perfect romance was never...
Gaslighting experiments. Imagine someone tells you over and over that what you saw or felt didn't actually happen. At first you fight back. You're sure you're right. But slowly, as their voice grows louder and more certain, you start to wonder, am I the one who's wrong? This is the core of gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation that makes people doubt their own reality. The term comes from a 1940s movie called Gaslight, where a husband dimmed the lights at home but denied it when his wife noticed. Over time, she started to think she was losing her mind. Psychologists later studied this effect
to understand how easy it is to break someone's trust in their own memory and perception. Gaslighting works because the human mind already has gaps. Memory isn't perfect, it's fragile. When someone confidently tells you your version is false, your brain tries to make sense of the conflict. Doubt creeps in. The more it happens, the more you give up on your own truth. In experiments, people were shown events and later told by authority figures or peers that things happened differently. Many participants changed their answers, even when their original memory was correct. The frightening part isn't just the lie, it's how the brain rewrites itself to match the lie. Take a moment to reflect. Gaslighting shows how fragile trust in ourselves can be, and in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon.
The imposter syndrome trap. Have you ever worked hard, achieved something big, and still felt like you didn't deserve it? Maybe you got good grades, landed a new job, or people praised your skills. But deep inside, you thought, they're wrong about me. I'm a fraud. That creeping fear is known as imposter syndrome. It was first studied in the late 1970s when psychologists noticed that many successful people, especially women in high positions, felt they didn't belong. Instead of seeing their success as the result of effort and talent, they explained it away as luck, timing, or tricking others. No matter how much proof of their worth existed, the feeling stayed. Any day now, they'll find out I'm not good enough. The scary thing about imposter syndrome is that it hides inside silence. People rarely admit it out loud because saying, "I feel fake," seems embarrassing. But secretly, millions live with it. Celebrities, scientists, even CEOs have confessed to this strange mental trap. The mind builds an invisible wall, keeping achievements on one side and self-worth on the other. Why does it matter? Because imposter syndrome drains joy from success. You can reach milestones, yet instead of celebrating, you spiral into doubt. It makes you work harder, not out of passion, but out of fear of being caught. It tricks you into thinking you're alone, when in reality, almost everyone has felt it. Take a moment to reflect. Think about your own wins. Did you ever shrink them down?
The self-reference effect. Think about the last time you studied for a test or tried to remember a list of random words. Chances are, the words that stuck with you were the ones you could connect to yourself. If you saw the word dog and you thought, "I had a dog growing up," you'd likely remember it better. This is the self-reference effect, the mind's tendency to hold on to things that relate to you. Psychologists found this by giving people lists of words and asking them to process them in different ways. Some had to count letters, others had to think about the meaning. But the strongest memory boost came when people asked themselves, "Does this describe me?" Suddenly, memory got sharper. The brain loves to keep anything tied to the self. On the surface, it makes sense. Remembering things about yourself helps you survive, form identity, and navigate life. But here's the unsettling part. If your brain mostly clings to self-related information, then your whole reality might be built like a mirror, always reflecting you back at yourself. Are you truly learning about the world, or just reinforcing the story of you? Take a moment to reflect. Social media amplifies. The self-reference effect is a gentle but eerie reminder. The self sits at the core of memory. But does this mean your mind cares less about truth, history, or others, and more about protecting the story of you?
Cognitive dissonance. Imagine believing something your whole life, only to face evidence that proves you wrong. It feels uncomfortable, even painful. Instead of calmly accepting the truth, many people twist the facts or invent excuses to protect their original belief. This strange mental struggle is called cognitive dissonance. The idea was first studied in the 1950s. A psychologist named Leon Festinger looked at a group of people who believed the world was going to end on a certain date. They prepared, waited, and believed with all their hearts. But when the date came and nothing happened, something curious occurred. Instead of admitting the prophecy was false, many believers claimed their faith had actually saved the world. The belief and reality clashed, and their minds chose comfort over truth. Cognitive dissonance happens to all of us. Think of eating junk food while knowing it's unhealthy, or staying in a relationship that feels wrong because you've already invested so much time. Your mind tries to hold two opposing ideas, but it hates the tension. To fix it, it rewrites the story. It's not that bad. I'll change later. Or this is worth it. The scary part is how easily this process can blind us. Instead of facing reality, we bend it. Our beliefs can become stronger when they're challenged, not weaker. That means the harder the truth hits, the deeper we might dig into lies. Pause here. Ask yourself, how many of your truths are just stories your mind built to escape dissonance? How many times have you defended something not because it was right, but because admitting you were
The Proteus Effect. Imagine you're playing a video game or walking around in virtual reality. You look down and your body isn't your real one. It's taller, stronger, maybe more attractive. At first, it feels like just a game, but soon, something strange happens. You start acting differently, as if the avatar is rubbing off on you. This is called the Proteus Effect. Psychologists discovered that the way your avatar looks can change how you behave, even after you leave the virtual world. In experiments, people given taller avatars became more confident in negotiations. Those given more attractive avatars acted friendlier and more outgoing. The identity you wear in virtual space can shape your real-world personality. The name comes from Proteus, a shape-shifting god in Greek mythology. Just like he could change forms, we can change selves when we slip into digital skins. But the unsettling part is how easily the mind adapts. If pixels and code can rewrite confidence, shyness, or even morality, how stable is your true self? Take a moment to reflect. Every day online, you craft a version of yourself through photos, usernames, filters, or avatars. Are you really you in those spaces, or are you becoming the mask you designed? The Proteus Effect whispers that identity isn't fixed. It bends and shifts depending on the body, real or virtual, that you find yourself in. And as technology grows, this effect might only get stronger. What happens when we spend more time in digital worlds than in physical ones? Which version of you will become the real?
The mirror test. Picture this. A chimpanzee is placed in front of a mirror for the first time. At first, it reacts as if another chimp is staring back. Curious, sometimes even aggressive. But after a while, something changes. The chimp starts touching parts of its own body it could never normally see, like a spot on its face. This moment suggests something powerful: self-recognition. This experiment is called the mirror test. Psychologists use it to ask a deep question: which animals can recognize themselves? To test this, researchers place a colored mark on the animal's body, somewhere they can only see in a mirror. If the animal touches the mark on itself rather than the mirror, it shows awareness that the reflection is me. Humans usually pass this test around 18 months of age, but surprisingly, so do some animals: chimpanzees, dolphins, elephants, and even magpies. Meanwhile, many others, like dogs and cats, and most monkeys, fail. They may bark, paw, or attack the other animal in the glass. The implications are haunting. Passing the test suggests some level of self-awareness, the ability to know, I am me. If certain animals can do this, it blurs the line between human and non-human minds. And if others fail, does that mean they lack selfhood? Or just that mirrors aren't part of how they understand the world? Pause for a second. When you look into a mirror, you instantly know it's you. But what if this ability is not universal? What if self-awareness is rarer than we think, even among humans? The mirror test leaves us wondering, is self-awareness a gift, a curse, or just another illusion created by the brain?
The rubber hand illusion. Imagine sitting at a table with one of your hands. The rubber hand illusion. Imagine sitting at a table with one of your hands hidden behind a screen. In front of you, there's a fake rubber hand placed where your real hand should be. A researcher starts to stroke both the fake hand and your real hidden hand at the same time, with the same rhythm. At first, you know the rubber hand isn't yours. It looks fake, but after a little while,
something strange happens. Your brain begins to adopt the rubber hand as if it were part of your body. You might even flinch if the fake hand is threatened with a hammer or a knife. This strange trick is called the rubber hand illusion. It shows how your sense of self, the feeling that your body belongs to you, is not fixed. It can be hacked with simple signals. Your brain uses sight, touch, and timing to decide what's you. When those signals line up just right, your brain accepts even a fake limb as part of your body. The implications are chilling. If your brain can be fooled about something as basic as your own hand, what else could it be wrong about? Is your sense of self just a fragile construction held together by patterns your brain expects to see? Take a moment to reflect on this. You live every day with the feeling of owning your body, but the rubber hand illusion whispers that this feeling may just be an illusion, something your brain builds, not something guaranteed. And if the brain can be tricked so easily, what does that mean for deeper parts of
Psychopathy Studies. When we hear the word psychopath, we often think of horror movies or criminals. But in psychology, the picture is more subtle and more disturbing. A psychopath doesn't always look dangerous. In fact, they often wear what one doctor called a mask of sanity. This phrase comes from psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley, who studied people with psychopathy in the mid-1900s. On the outside, they seemed normal, even charming. They smiled, laughed, and could hold conversations like anyone else. But beneath that mask, something vital was missing: true empathy and guilt. Psychopathy studies show that these individuals often understand emotions in a logical way, but don't feel them deeply. For example, if you tell a psychopath about someone's pain, they might know it sounds sad, but inside, they don't experience the same emotional pull most people do. This lack of inner response can make them skilled at manipulation. They learn to mimic normal human behavior, using it like a mask. What makes this truly chilling is how convincing the mask can be. Some psychopaths become successful leaders, business people, or public figures. Their charm hides the emptiness inside, and people rarely notice until harm is already done. Pause for a moment. Think about the people you've met who seemed overly smooth, overly confident, almost too good to be true. Was it real connection or just performance? Psychopathy reminds us that appearances can deceive. The smiling face across from you may not reveal what's inside. And that raises an unsettling question. If some people can fake humanity so well, how do we ever truly